March 5th, 1982 was a Friday. This young man was robbed, kidnapped, and his home was burned to the ground. 2 months later, this man, Michael Frederick, who has a reputation for walking the streets with a gun in his back pocket, who is wanted for robbery, drug trafficking, and attempted arson, pawns the class ring that belongs to the wife of the missing man. Michael is arrested. He gives 10 different stories about how he got the ring, admits he was involved, and leads authorities to the body. He claims that he was forced to participate in the act of murder by another man who recently loaned him money to get out of jail. This is the man that loaned him money, John Mills Jr., a practicing black Muslim who is now going to be tried for killing the young man, a young man who was also the son of the most prominent white Christian reverend in the county. So let's talk about the reverend for a second. The reverend's day job was selling insurance, and every so often he would have to renew his license to do so. On his renewal application are the names and signatures of his 2 closest friends. One is the county's clerk of court, and the other is a judge that tried the case. A conflict of interest, obviously, but so what? Who cares? John Mills Jr. is tried by an all-white jury. No murder weapon is ever found. During the trial, someone threatened to blow up both the courthouse and the Tallahassee Democrat newspaper. His lawyers received so many threats that they were given armed police escorts in and out of the courthouse, in and out of the county. The man who pointed the finger at John, Michael Frederick, changed his story 5 years later. And it came to light that Michael was also a pimp. One of Michael's prostitutes was a 16-year-old female with bleach blonde hair. Evidence from the crime scene include items that may have been hers, including strands of bleach blonde hair. But she never testifies because she goes missing just before the trial begins. Fast forward 14 years later, John Mills Jr. is executed by the state of Florida. John Mills was my uncle, and the day after his execution, I received a letter from him. I also received more than 35 handwritten journals that he had kept during his time on death row. I turned his words into a book that told the history of our family and the story of his life. The state of Florida has the highest number of people exonerated, freed from death row in the entire United States. I am not a bleeding heart. I don't believe that everybody on death row is innocent. I am not here to blame any victims, and I do not take lightly what has happened to their families. When a murder is committed, it should first of all be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt who did it. The guilty party should be punished. I firmly believe that. I do not believe that we should also become murderers in the process, or grow so arrogant as to call our sanitized killing justice. When my uncle was executed, it was the complete opposite of what happened to the crime victim's family, even though we shared the similar pain of losing a loved one in a horrific fashion. I represent those people who have been shocked, gassed, and injected with the psychological poison of execution. When our loved ones are murdered, nobody rushes over with plates of food for us. And if they do, we don't eat because we don't know what else is cooking in their mind. Who among them has a taste for revenge? There are no nice obituaries in the paper. Instead, there are these cryptic articles and reporters who turn the person we love into a monster. My uncle became known as Mad Dog Mills. We want answers. We want justice. Somebody has to pay. It's an eye for an eye. That is all we ever hear. Invasion of the body snatchers is no longer a fantasy. It becomes a reality. My uncle demanded that he not be buried in our county because people were threatening to dig him up. Today, I want to share with all of you what it is that the unknown survivors of execution already know. And thanks to the death penalty, our numbers will grow in the days, weeks, and months to come. And for those of you in this room who will be joining our tribe, Here are 5 things that you should know on how to survive an execution. The first thing to know is that you will be ignored. Nobody wants to hear your story, and they will tell you this to your face. Unlike the crime victim's family, you will be ominously shunned, expected to vanish and suffer in silence. You will not have the right to call premeditated murder or execution an injustice. When the media, the governor who signs the death warrant, and the online internet bigots finish their work, you will not recognize your loved one. It will appear as if they had no love, no background, and no human contact in life. One step below Tarzan, it will appear as if they were raised by a pack of wolves. And those wolves, those animals, will eventually become you and your family. And the mugshots generated by the system, by the American justice killing machine, will be used to drive those points forward. You will not be invited to the killer's lounge, the death chamber, where the nice-looking murder of your loved one is taking place. Nobody wants you there. You will not have a seat at the table where an entree of justice is about to be served and your loved one is the main dish. We, those unknown survivors of execution, must never forget our loved one's memory, ourselves, or those who are grieving with us. We are the ones who must try to live with dignity in an undignified world. 2 is to know that you will become a likely suspect. Raise your hand if you've ever known anybody close to you that's ever committed suicide. Okay, so you have an idea of what I mean when I say that people won't say or ask you certain things directly, but their eyes and their actions will speak volumes. How could you let this happen? How could you not know that this person was capable of this or of that? Maybe you weren't a good parent. Maybe you weren't a good friend. You will stare at yourself in the mirror. You will cry and vomit up your answers. And when you've gotten it all together and you step out to face that world, it's the eyes, the actions, the questions, and you stop going out at all. You think you're going crazy. The rest of the world says that you are, because how could you let this happen? But the real question, I think, is what will happen next? What will you do to honor the memory of someone you loved that the rest of the world despised enough to kill? And how firm will you stand when some of those very same people harbor a desire to kill you? 3rd is to know that you risk becoming all the things that you hate. What happens next becomes a frightening question, because now the territory is wide open for you to do unto others all that's been done unto you. If you have never been a violent person, trust me, you will want to punch somebody in the mouth on occasion. If you've never been a judgmental person and somebody comes up to you with all of that kumbaya, we are the world bullshit, you will destroy them. Why? Because you want them to feel what you feel. Your hope has been murdered, and now your mind has begun to turn. You begin to think. How many real-life John Waynes, Dirty Harrys, and U.S. presidents have used "In God We Trust" as a weapon to commit murder and gotten away with it? Murdering people, foreign and domestic, to satisfy us, the angry mob that is never satisfied. With so many people locked up in our system of rehabilitation, why are there so many repeat offenders? How does a Department of Corrections evolve into a Department of Commerce, privatized corporation, greed, and corruption? Unknown survivors of execution see justice for the joke that it often is. I live in a world where people got down on their knees and prayed for my uncle to be strapped into a chair, a medieval device attached to his skull, a black cloth draped over his face, and more than 2,000 volts of electricity slammed to his body. Murdered with no proof that he did it. And then they wiped the blood from their hands, put on a nice clean suit, and drove to church on Sunday to sing "God is on my side." What I'm trying to tell you is that I feel that we have been taught violence by masters who look down their noses to call us the savages on the 6 o'clock news. And yet, the unknown survivors of execution have been given this magical key, and that key unlocks the unusual door. That door opens wide on the falsehoods, the double standards, and the hypocrisy of American justice. Fourth is to know that you lose the power to forget. I have often wondered what my uncle's face looked like in that moment. What were his thoughts? Did he scream? Was he silent? Did he cry? Did he pray? Maybe he called out for me or my mother or my grandmother by name. My grandmother was 79 years old when she died. But whenever she thought about my uncle, it was written all over her because it never, ever goes away. They are not mugshots to us. They are not the latest MSN homepage news article to us. They are the bits, the pieces of marrow inside of our bones. Your parent is dead. Your child is dead. Your best friend is dead. You can never forget how much you love them, right? And just like the survivors of execution know, you can never let anybody in this world make you feel ashamed or embarrassed for the person that you love and how you love. And finally, number 5, know that you might gain the power to forgive, and the key word here is might. Over a decade ago, I lived in Harlem, and one morning on my way to work, our train stopped, and we were trapped underground. And when we finally pulled into the station, before the doors even opened, everybody on the train heard it. Screaming, crying, running, chaos. And when we got above ground, it was even worse because there were people covered in what looked like flour, but turned out to be ashes from the World Trade Center. My uncle had been dead about 5 years, but it was in that moment that I thought, I want you to understand what I mean by this. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm not trying to be ugly. I want you to understand me. But it was in that moment that I thought, finally. Everybody in America just caught up. Now they know our emptiness. Now they know what it feels like to be powerless when somebody else is holding out and balancing that so-called scale of justice. And still, the last thing that I wanted in this world was for anybody else to be murdered in retaliation. But you don't always get what you want. When you execute someone, when you murder someone, you never forget, because the memory of what you did, what you allowed yourself to become in that moment is always inside of you, inside of your nation, somewhere. There is no remedy for the problem that an execution is meant to solve. And those of us who feed on execution have done nothing more than adopt the birthmark, the curse of Cain. And even the God that we praise and foam at the mouth to love did not kill Cain. Unknown survivors of execution share a very odd experience. But forgiveness might come when we share our story with others, giving someone else the gift of our journey, accepting their gift in return. We become the trailblazers. We are the ones that move us toward a justice, a real justice that America, as old as she is, has yet to truly conceive. We change communities. We change laws. We have a right to backtalk a world that has not only tried to hide us, but has dared us to call murder by its given name. From the lowlife to the high court, a murder is a murder, is a murder, is a murder, is a murder, is a murder. It is all the same. But if murder must take place, I have come to ask you, to beg you, to please let it be the murder of the death penalty. Thank you.